This week, Parag Bajaria from Qualys and Terry Barber from Amex are with us to discuss simplifying cloud security. Then we'll do a roundup of our favorite news, trends, and interviews in 2022. Finally, in the enterprise security news, we see our first security unicorn with a down round, a few new fundings and new companies emerging. Ninjas emerge from stealth. Proofpoint acquires detection vendor Elusive. Veracode picks up crash test security. Apple encrypts more consumer data. Passkeys introduced in Chrome. Texas bans TikTok. A great postmortem of the Joe Sullivan case. InfraGard gets hacked. KringleCon 2022. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra.
From G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy Cat Herders Day. This is episode 300, recorded on Thursday, December 15th, 2022. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, the captain of content, Katie Teitler. How are you, Katie?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I can now see your reactions while I'm reading stuff, whereas at home, I can only see me when I'm reading through my scripts. So it's very interesting seeing everyone's reactions because I've got all these monitors here. This is my first time to the actual Security Weekly studios in Rhode Island, and there are a lot of conveniences here I don't have at home.
You are glowing pink. You have a pink halo.
I do. That's not the actual color behind me, but yes. Yeah, they're doing some fancy stuff in post, I guess.
Nice.
Also joining us is the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf. How are you, Sean?
Doing good, Adrian. Yeah, being in the studio there suits you. Looking good behind that big table and microphone and setup. I better watch out for my reactions as you say things now that I know you can see me the whole time.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I've always known that Paul could. Anytime I'm on a show with Paul. Because on PSW, sometimes he has 7-8 people, co-hosts on there. So like he told me early on, I'm always worried about interrupting, when there's that many people, everybody wants to jump in at once. He was like, oh, just put up a finger or something like that. And I'll see you in one of my monitors and I'll know you have a question and I'll call on you, so it's definitely a convenience I don't have at home. It's really neat.
With Paul,
so you're saying you don't have an 8-monitor setup?
Well, even if I did, I don't think they have the ability to send me all those video feeds, right? Like I'm just joining via Skype like you guys are, so I see what the audience sees.
So sorry, you're saying you don't have an 8-monitor setup at home. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I could. I've got a lot of monitors. I've got 3. Including the teleprompter, but yeah, it would be the technical bit of getting all these additional video feeds sent back to me. I could do it. Like I've got the setup where I could make it happen if we could figure out a way to do it, Gus. So cat herding, that is an actual thing. It is cat herding day. Which
I've had that job.
As we get into the holidays, and we're trying to make sure we got gifts for everyone that we feel like we need to get gifts for, it seems appropriate for December 15th. It's like peak holiday anxiety at this point for a lot of people, maybe. All right. Quick announcement here. Join our Discord channel to chat with our hosts, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/Discord to receive an invite. And we do monitor that during the show. And if anybody has questions, we'll try and squeeze them in as they come in. So our first interview for today is sponsored by Qualys, and today's topic is simplifying cloud security. We're excited to have two guests with us for this segment, Parag Bajaria, VP of Product Management for Cloud and Container Security Solutions at Qualys, and Terry Barber, Manager of Security Operations at American Express Global Business Travel. Welcome, Terry and Parag.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, so as I swivel in my seat to face you, I'm loving this. All right. So I understand, Terry, you're a customer of Qualys, correct?
Yes, I am.
And you and Parag recently got together at a customer Qualys event and had a similar conversation to this, or was it different?
No, it was very similar. We actually went over a lot of information about how we're using and utilizing Qualys to get a better picture of what's going on in our AWS accounts as far as vulnerabilities and inventory.
And I love this because I'm also head of product at a small startup, and it's fascinating. It can be difficult getting feedback from customers, and it's really essential. I think to have customers willing to check out a product early and kind of commit to the extra time it takes to give feedback formally and say, hey, it should work like this. This feature's great, but it's hard to fully utilize it. To give all that feedback that really polishes a product and makes it ready for customers, right?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I thoroughly enjoy doing. Parag's been a good cooperative business partner and a great vendor. I was introduced to him by my TAM, Lori, and she, set me up with him when I had a bunch of questions about how I was going to do particular items in AWS, and we hit it off, and we've had some really good conversations.
Yeah, I think the whole concept of design partner, right? I mean, that is what I think we are seeing evolution in the industry, right? That we want customers not as just the paying entities, right? We want to change that relationship, right? Where we can actually involve them in the conversation, because as you know, right, we build something and then it flops. It doesn't work. It's a lot more work to unflop that, right? And it's better to have these kinds of conversations early on. As you are working on your journey on your startup, right? Customer interviews, right? Those are the best things. Showing mocks, getting as much data as possible is the best thing that we can do, because that cuts down all the assumptions that you make and you get direct feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I imagine, from the vendor side, probably in your past, Parag, you've had moments where you're like, man, I wish we had this feedback earlier on in the design process. And then from Terry's point of view, the customer perspective, I'm sure we've all had moments using products where we thought, I wish I could have given them my input, before this was, before this product was released. And it seems very natural to do that. It's a very effective way of making sure you end up with a polished product. Of course, you always have to weigh in, different features. There's so many factors that go into, could we include this? Yes, but there's a lot of those yes buts as well, right? Because the product has to be usable, functional. You can't put every feature in there. There's not enough time to squeeze everything everyone wants.
Yeah, of course. That is the whole challenge of MVP, right? MVP, as people have said, right? It's a combination of science and art, right? And your MVP might not be my MVP.
Right.
So having some real world feedback definitely helps you guide towards this. And that's where that relationship with Terry, especially as we were thinking about total cloud and what are the different things, right? Having that guidance from all the way from where they were seeing the problems, where their roadmap was going, right, and then kind of boiling down to feature and functionality, right? That's what happened, right? But a lot of times, we product guys have a tendency to talk features and functionality, and that's prevalent, right? That, hey, look, I built this new knob, and I want to talk to you about that knob, right? And we have to resist that temptation and then talk to our customers from a use case where they see, and then bring them those things back to product features and functionality.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and let's shift a bit to talking about cloud security. So I've been tracking cloud security for a while. I formerly covered it as an industry analyst at 451 Research, and I've been playing around with cloud, since AWS first came out, with just a few products. They've got a few more than they had back in 2006, 2007 now, well into the hundreds. I actually used to have slides where I took a screenshot every year of the main AWS console screen. And it used to have a tile for every single product they had. And of course, they reached a point where that it was just impossible to fit them all on one screen. So now it's almost impossible to fit all the categories of products on one screen.
All hierarchical now.
Yeah. And so it was interesting to see security respond to that, because of course AWS has always had security features baked in. And then they came out with the marketplace, and we saw a lot of traditional security products put their traditional products in the marketplace, because you could use some traditional products within the cloud. You still can. You can run these as if they're appliances, you can run them as EC2 instances. And then we started to see products using the native cloud APIs to integrate. And we've just seen this really interesting evolution of these products to where now we have these big cloud platforms. So maybe first Terry and then Parag, just wanted to get your thoughts on this journey of cloud security, just managing cloud security itself, and the part that products make in them, and kind of bring that back to the title of this segment, simplifying cloud security. Is the reason for that title that we got to a point to where it was just you needed too many products, and the idea here is to consolidate and to have a consolidated platform? Or, you tell me. I'll start with you, Terry.
Sure. That's actually a great question, because it's the problem that we ran into when we first started going from physical data centers into AWS. And everybody's inherent traditional way of doing their particular deployments doesn't actually translate well, in my opinion, into the cloud. There are so many different features, there's so many different services, there's so many different ways to manage your different security tools when you get into that particular environment. So with Qualys, we're looking at, okay, we are traditionally doing cloud agents, we are traditionally using appliances, and we're doing scans as well as pulling information back from cloud agents. And how are we going to port that over into AWS, and how are we going to pull that information back, and how are we going to actually see all of the different assets and resources that we have in that particular environment? And as you start to move in, the first time that you've done it, if you've never had that particular environment before, you start finding out that you've got gaps, you've got holes in places that you didn't expect to see them in. And inherently, a lot of traditional aspects of security start coming in. Well, let's add this tool, let's add that tool, let's turn this feature on, let's do a POC on this particular tool. It's supposed to be good in cloud environments. And we start looking at all these different security tools, and you get inundated with additional information. And the first thing that you run into is, okay, how do I get all this information and put it into one place? how can I get correlation and aggregation of all this data that I'm pulling back so I can actually see what I'm looking at if I've got all these particular tools coming back? And that's actually when we started looking at CloudView. CloudView is the Qualys solution for having connectors that are set up to your AWS accounts. They pull back the inventory. They start looking at all the resources. Then we found out that they had cloud HVMs. So pre-authorized, just go ahead and stand it up. Got an appliance up and running. It's very simple to do. You can stand one up in about 5-10 minutes. Get that up and running. Get your cloud agents installed on your EC2s. So if you've got traditional operating systems, so you've got Windows and Linux and some of your other flavors of Linux that you want to get your cloud agents installed on, you get those up and running, and all that information starts coming into a singular console. And Parag, I'm going to let you kind of speak to this a little bit more because you've got obviously information about where this is going with Total Cloud. But for me, the big thing that I saw was I've got a singular dashboard where I can go look at the information that's coming in from AWS. I can see my resources. I can do my policy compliance scans. I can do my cloud agent polls, and I can do my HVM scans, so I can scan all the rest of the network and get all my information. I can do my perimeter scans. I can do my PCI scans, and all that information is coming into a singular console. And that simplified everything for us. The next part that comes after that, I'm sure we'll get into, but it was all about having a single pane of glass with all the information readily available where we could do actionable actions against those particular items so that we could actually go back to our C-level suite and say, we've got coverage, we know what our gaps are, we're getting things filled, we know what we're scanning, we can see what they're standing up, and we're getting everything covered so that we don't have a particular gap when a vulnerability comes out.
Parag, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so I think Terry covered most of the broader aspects, right, of single pane of glass, being able to do things. What I want to let's paint a picture, right, that in the cloud world, right, the most of the things are accessible through API, and the vision that we are going forward towards, right, is that you give us your cloud credentials, by which we don't mean username, password, right, but your roles, permissions, etc. And then we will use that information to do all the orchestration necessary to get the security data, get it all analyzed in our backend, right, and all SaaS oriented, and get you the results, right? So there's very little work that you do from an orchestration perspective, right? It's all done by us, right? So imagine an experience of, hey, I go into a console, I give my org level account in AWS, and boom, here are the results. Now, one of the things that you observe as your environment becomes complex is that you have tons of vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and other important security findings that all come together. And now you're sorting through millions of these things, right? And it doesn't help. You can't scale, right? So the second aspect to this is, instead of just providing data, which is what most vendors do, is we provide data, right? We want to start providing insights, right? That what are the things that you should act on? For example, right, a vulnerability may be of high severity, but if it's a remotely exploitable vulnerability and the virtual machine on which you discovered this vulnerability is not internet facing, then fixing that vulnerability on that VM is not as important as, fixing the vulnerability on the instance that is, right? So being able to give you understanding of all the important aspects, quantifying that in some sort of a metric, right, a risk metric that allows you to then look at, okay, here are all my risks, right, and then what are the priorities of those risks, and then going and addressing that, and then putting all of these things in a single glass of paint, right? That's what I call simplifying the cloud security. Today, I feel like a lot of vendors, including ourselves, right? We talk about all these various acronyms like CWPP and CSPM and IACE and CIEM, etc. And those acronyms are just generating confusion, right? In the end, right, you want a single pane of glass where you can look at different security aspects and then understand how they correlate to each other. And eventually, right, they come into a single metric of some risk metric that you can understand. So that's the Qualys vision, right, which is to enable zero touch kind of a setup where you can easily get to your risk posture. You can then take that risk posture, prioritize it, and then do remediation, and that's the end of it, right? So that's where we are heading. We just announced Total Cloud, which is our attempt, I should say, version 1.0, to get the cloud security simplified. We are bringing a whole bunch of elements here, especially around simplifying the orchestration of the scanning workflows. And that journey includes single pane of glass, risk-based prioritization, remediation, etc.
So it sounds like maybe we're talking about a few different products here. What Terry described sounded like some traditional host-based vulnerability scanning, right? Some agent-based vulnerability scanning. So we're getting vulnerabilities from the host. But yeah, looking at Total Cloud, it looks like you would also be identifying, maybe S3 bucket misconfigurations, things on the AWS control plane, the actual cloud control plane, and combining that with, and that's something I just want to clarify a bit and understand. Where are all these vulnerabilities coming from? Where are you pulling these vulnerabilities from into this product?
Yeah, so vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, those are the two main dimensions as far as the cloud security go, because they interplay with each other. I would say permissions is another important dimensions. Now, vulnerabilities do have a very since this vulnerability has been around, there are very well documented sources of vulnerability, NVD database. There are a few open source feeds around this, and Qualys has been in this space for a while. We have our own vulnerability research team. As you know, we've been publishing, we're discovering and publishing different vulnerabilities that we detect, right? So it's a very set field. The sources of vulnerabilities are many, but the interesting part here is the understanding of which vulnerabilities matter, right? So that problem is being addressed by what they say severity of the vulnerability, right? You have a CVSS score, right? Now, that was the first attempt at how do we go about prioritizing vulnerabilities, right, by the impact, right? But as you mature yourself and you see that actually those scores by themselves are not useful because they lack the context, right? Whether this vulnerability, as I was explaining earlier, if it's a remote exploitable vulnerability, if it is on a workload that is not internet facing, or it's not possible to get to it, right? Then it doesn't matter, right? So that severity doesn't matter. So in that sense, we not only do the analysis from a fundamental severity perspective, but then layer on the context on top of it, and then assign a risk metric, which we came up with our term true risk, right? But it's just a metric where we are layering the context of the thing. So yeah. So coming back to sorry, like, okay, the original question, right? Yes, we get vulnerabilities from many sources, including ourselves, and then we enrich the vulnerability information with the context. I explained to you one context is location, but there are other
Sure.
things like threat vectors, right?
Is there an
this
active
vulnerability
exploit?
being
Are people
exploited,
actively
etc.?
using the exploit? Yeah. Contextual prioritization, I think, is table stakes these days, right? Like, you have to have that in there because there's a large number of vulnerabilities that just aren't a huge risk to the organization. They have to be there for it to be comprehensive and complete, but they're just not the first thing you're going to worry about.
Yeah, and Adrian, if I might add to that, I'm going to jump in here for a second from a customer's perspective. One of the things that we're working towards is having more of a full stack picture of what's going on in the AWS account. So as you were asking, it's not just about the vulnerabilities. It's not just about the compliancy settings. It's going to be everything across the board. So have they actually set up the accounts? Have they set up, S3 buckets so they're not publicly available? Are they using encryption? Are they, what settings do they currently have across all the different resources that are actually in that environment? Stack on top of that the vulnerabilities. So maybe you've got EC2s, you got standard, Windows or Linux or whatever, and then you've also got your container environments. So you've got infrastructure that's supporting a Docker cluster. Maybe you're using Fargate. You're using something to support your containers. You've got your containers, your images that are in your containers, and then, of course, the applications that are running on those containers. And you're looking to make sure, and this ties into what Parag was saying, that when you're looking at the entire picture, all of those different factors are coming into your vulnerability score for that particular environment and those particular sets of resources.
Yeah, so just a quick question that occurred to me. AWS has its own tagging system, right? Built in. And Terry, I'm getting a reaction from you. What's your thoughts there? Is that...
I am a huge proponent of tagging. I'm very, very fond of tagging. As a matter of fact, we actually base everything that we do on tagging in our particular environment, and Qualys is our authoritative source for our tags. So where the infrastructure team will go through and put AWS tags on particular assets, regardless of what they are, so we can actually dynamically pull those tags into and then create tags in Qualys that mirror those particular tags that then feed into all of our other systems. So if we, pull that information in, we know information about which applications are running, who's the business owner, who's the support owner, who's the support team, any one of a number of different types of tags that they're going to put on that particular asset are going to come into Qualys, and then we can do actionable items against those particular tags. And so tagging for me is incredibly important. It also then builds the foundation for how we disseminate information to who's responsible for those. So as an example, C-level executive comes by and says, hey, we're wanting to know how we're doing across all these different business applications, and we want to know who's lagging behind on taking care of the remediation in the environment. And is that remediation application-based or infrastructure-based? And based upon the tags and the way that we pull everything back, and we can do that directly in the reporting functions that are built into Qualys, we can actually look and see who's actually keeping up with their workload and who's lagging behind.
Right. I want to give my co-hosts a chance to ask some questions here. Sean?
Sure thing. So there's been a few things discussed around vulnerability scanning around cloud workloads and the fact that you can identify if they're internet facing and adjust criticality or priority around those. What are some of the other key differences? I mean, I'm familiar with Qualys's vulnerability scanning for on-prem systems. What are some of the key differences between Qualys scanning of the on-prem systems and cloud, just beyond this contextual awareness, as you mentioned?
Parag, I'll let you go ahead and take that if you like.
Yeah. So this is the workloads are workloads, right? And whether they sit on-prem or whether they sit in cloud, the vulnerability information is is not changing per se, right? It's the context in which the vulnerability is assessed that changes a lot. And I mean, we've been using the example of cloud, but even in on-prem, right? I mean, where you're locating your vulnerability is important, what threats are being exploited, etc., right? So and I would say that from discovery, nothing changes, right? I mean, it's still a workload, but it's the implication of the context. Now, one of the interesting aspects of cloud is that we can use the APIs to discover the software inventory on which then we can do the vulnerability analysis, right? So from an on-prem perspective, there's a lack of that standardized layer where we can grab that information, which is where we need to use either our network scanners or agents to grab that information. But with cloud, we have alternative ways to do this, which means that we can support both agent-based and agentless assessment, which makes things easier for us to orchestrate as far as the assessment process itself. Did I answer your question, Sean?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. The other kind of follow-on to this is with the cloud scans that you're doing, are you incorporating information from IAM, the Identity Access and Management System, to identify who has rights or controls of different groupings of workloads or systems in the environment? And then if so, do you correlate that with tagging as well as the potential networks that they might be on in order to identify vulnerabilities that could be controlled or even by an account that's or controlled or implemented from an account that's in that environment?
Yeah, so you make a very important point here, right? That in cloud world, you need to understand the relationships between different assets, right? So that once you know that relationships, and some relationships are kind of encoded, right? A virtual machine may have a security group. An EC2 instance will have a security group, right? And some relationships are dynamic. One of those dynamic relationship is the IAM permission, right? Whether a EC2 instance can act on a S3 bucket, right? So those relationships are dynamic. The other dynamic relationship is who is communicating with what, right? And being able to see that, right? So one of the things that we are building is this graph view of things, right? Because everything is connected to each other, right? And being able to see all of it in one place, because that is important for yet another concept that you will start hearing from many of the vendors, is the attack path analysis, right? So if my sensitive data is located in this, let's say, RDS database, right? Okay, if I may have protected this RDS database, but if there was a virtual machine which had an IAM access to this RDS database, then I have a problem, right? Is that particular, if this virtual machine gets compromised, then this anybody who gets in here can access this RDS instance. But that's not the piece alone. Now, if this virtual machine has vulnerabilities, that means high criticality vulnerabilities, that means my risk level went up. And you can see as the attack chain kind of builds up, even from an identity perspective, right? If this RDS instance has that sensitive data and I have this identity here, right? And it can access this RDS database. Well, does it have, if this identity does not have MFA enabled, my risk factor went tremendously high, right? Because that key factor was not there, or if the password policy was not set up for any of these, right? So all these risk factors do come in. and being able to aggregate that from like, okay, here's my sensitive data, and then here are all the different ways of how various entities that can interact with this sensitive data, and what are the risk levels associated with each of these entities, and then mapping each of these entities to any other factors that may be there, right? Any other factors is the key towards this full context understanding, right? So very much so, right? That in we are using this various correlation factors to then identify and quantify the overall risk for any particular workload.
Okay. And if I can tack onto that, I'll give you a little bit from my perspective on that one too, and I'll give you an easy use case. So if you've got a particular asset that's got a rather nasty vulnerability, and you would think that it would have a particularly low score, but you go look at your policy compliance piece for that particular asset, which is coming in from the same connector. You've got the policy running against it. So, for example, CIS benchmarks against AWS, and you suddenly find out that somebody has opened up port 3389 or port 22 to the internet, and it's not supposed to be there. Now, suddenly that machine, that particular resource, has a higher rate on it because it's now exposed to the internet in a manner that it shouldn't be. So yes, it does give you more than just the vulnerabilities. You can look at different information from across all the different offerings that come with that particular tool to be able to look at, is it configured correctly? Are my containers running as root? Do I have ports open out to the internet that shouldn't be there? Am I exposing a database because somebody was uploading information and thought it was easier to do it by going over the internet as opposed to the VPN, so they opened a port up and they made changes to the security policy? You can see all those particular configuration items.
So does that map across the IAM configuration, or is that something that's more specific around like risk policies or baseline security settings?
It's across both, actually, because they're pulling in all the information from the security groups. They're pulling all the information and doing assessment against it with the benchmarks. And the one piece that we haven't talked about is you're not just limited to the benchmarks that come with the actual module, but you can actually create some of your own as well. So if you have particular configurations that you want to monitor specifically that aren't in the standard benchmarks or the policies that come with the system automatically, you can actually build your own out.
All right, Katie, I think you had a question.
I did have a question. A little while ago, there was some mention of remediation, and I was just wondering what kinds of actions, what kind of enforcement actions can be taken, to mitigate some of those vulnerabilities, whether it's a misconfiguration or otherwise, overly permissive access that the tool might find.
Terry, you want to take that?
Sure.
How do you do it? And then I can follow up.
One of the things, and we literally just started going through and updating all of our connectors in the last couple of weeks because of a change that was made to the external ID that's required by AWS. And as you go through your connectors, you actually have the capability of turning remediation on the connector. So if you give write permissions to the actual connector, you could go through, for example, your settings for whether or not you've got S3 buckets that have encryption turned on, or encryption in transit, or fill in the blank, any one of a number of different compliance settings that are there. And you can actually, for many of them, go through and actually do remediation from the console. They also give you the ability to segregate that capability based upon permissions for users, so you can still have separation of duties. And that way you don't have somebody coming in that shouldn't have the ability to look and say, oh, I found something that shouldn't be turned on that way, make a change to it without going through CAB and going through your appropriate process. It has to actually go through the appropriate person, and only the people that are given that permission to make those changes could do so.
Yeah, the other aspect here is, as we know, remediation of any kind is dangerous in the production network, because if there are dependencies that you may or may not be aware of, right, that you can break something, right? So one of the things that we have recently done is that we can actually look at the pre-deployment configuration, right? So if we can see in your CloudFormation template, Terraform template, that there's something wrong, as in it doesn't follow that best practice, or we've seen that the encryption was not turned on for an S3 bucket, we can actually monitor that and give you that heads up that, hey, there's something going on. So this whole mentality of the shift left and being able to share the security responsibility, which was primarily owned by the security teams, to DevOps and devs who are responsible for creating those deployment artifacts. We can alert things ahead of time, right? Saying, hey, there's something wrong before things get into the production, right? So we're tackling the problem both from a ability to do remediation in production, but in a very careful, consistent, process-oriented, making sure that you have fallbacks, etc., and also making sure that actually you're doing remediation pre-deployment, right, for catching things early.
Yeah, Sean, go ahead with your next question here.
Sure thing. So just as a kind of follow-up on that, one of the things that I'm wondering about with Total Cloud is it's interesting to know that there's a vulnerability on this system or this system and how they connect. Does Total Cloud provide some sort of overall security review of, say, there's 80 servers that have RDP exposed to the internet within this network or within this tag, or some sort of insight around how these things are configured, and does that make sense for your environment? So that way there's this overview reporting of these sort of things that could be problematic or known problematic, to include, Parag, your example earlier about MFA missing on a certain number of admin accounts.
Yeah, so Total Cloud has a dashboard where we are bringing all these findings together, and the most important thing here is, right, that we want to generate insights, which is going beyond a single misconfiguration that you have, right? Insights is a combination of few important things that come together. Which creates what I would say a toxic situation or a bad configuration, right? So the idea, again, with the Total Cloud is to bring the data together and help you give insights and then prioritize those insights so that you can then take remediation actions against it, right? Because without that, other than a very simplistic environments, right, you are just going to get overwhelmed with lots of stuff. And I mean, Terry can speak to it, right? I mean, that probably has hundreds of thousands of issues that is challenged to solve and show progress against. And without that prioritization or insights, it's very, very hard to do that.
And to go back to your question specifically, there's a particular report tab that's built into the system that allows me to pull reports two different ways. I can actually do an export report. I can pull it as a CSV or a PDF, or I can do an on-screen report. So I can actually just look at it right there in the console. It'll save the work that I've done, so I can build that together. Yes, it does allow me to do filtering and building the report by tags. I can do it by accounts. I can go in and say, I just want to look at a specific set of machines. Like I might just want to look at the production environment, and we use tags for that. So we've got tags on dev, QA, prod, whatever, and we can go look at a specific environment, pull the stuff back. And if I want to look at one specific item, like the one that you actually asked about, MFA, I could actually say, this is the control that I want to look at, and how many are currently in fail state. And I can pull that singular report and focus on that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's how it should be, right?
Exactly.
Using the best practice of tags within AWS, and then within Qualys, you can filter on those tags, report on those tags. That's awesome.
It's one of those things where you get into a situation, right? When it was old school, 15, 20 years ago when we were doing vulnerabilities, you didn't worry too much about it because you only got a half a dozen every month or so, and it wasn't a big deal, and your environment wasn't that big. And you could look at your total number of vulnerabilities, and nobody was worrying about unique issues. And I'm going to use the term issues because we're not just talking about vulnerabilities here. We're talking about configuration problems. We're talking about, settings that are in AWS intrinsic. Have they got everything configured correctly? Do we have everything set up on our containers correctly? Do we have everything configured on the actual infrastructure correctly? So you might have policy compliance that's running against Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and you've got Docker sitting on top of that. So you do a CIS benchmark against Docker, and then on top of that, you're looking at all of the environment that particular Docker cluster is sitting in for AWS, and you're looking at the configuration on all of that. And you can then just wade through it, pull the whole thing down, and have this huge report that's unwieldy that you can't do anything with. Or you can look for unique problems and unique vulnerabilities, and you can then go, okay, we need to look at these particular issues that reside in the Docker cluster specifically. These are configuration problems. These need to go to this specific team, and we need to have these remediated. And we can take that particular group of unique problems, unique vulnerabilities, unique compliance issues, and we can move them off to the side, give them to the appropriate team, and that way they're not wading through all the white noise of all the other vulnerabilities.
I think that's an excellent summation and some great examples there, Terry. Parag and Terry, thank you so much for both joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been great.
Thank you.
Enjoyed being here, and great, very insightful questions.
Yeah, we try. Right? All right, so make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Qualys to learn more. Tons of information on this is on Qualys' website. There are also some great links in the show notes, so make sure to check those out as well. And stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to wrap up this year by discussing some of the big trends and events that shaped 2022, as well as some of our favorite interviews and guests from the last 11 months. The shift to remote and hybrid work over the past 2 years has accelerated application development on cloud infrastructure. However, securing these new assets has lagged behind. Qualys CloudView, the next generation of cloud security posture management, delivers an end-to-end multi-cloud security and compliance solution encompassing the entire application lifecycle from build to runtime. CloudView enables enterprises to assess their cloud security and compliance posture, identify risks and gaps, auto-remediate issues, proactively enforce best practices, and prove compliance in audits rapidly and efficiently. Identify your most vulnerable cloud assets by visiting securityweekly.com/Qualys. We know that many of you are looking to bolster your security posture with cloud-native app protection and XDR. So if you haven't heard of Uptycs, put them on your radar. They offer both cloud and endpoint security in a single solution. Listeners can use Uptycs for up to 1,000 assets for a full year for only $1. But hurry, this offer is available only through December 31st at securityweekly.com/UPTYCS. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners, we need to hear your voices. Leave us your feedback on Apple Podcasts and submit a screenshot to our giveaway form for a chance to win a $100 gift card from Hacker Warehouse. This giveaway will be open until the end of the year. We appreciate your honest feedback so that we can continue to make great content for our audience. Visit securityweekly.com/giveaway to enter. All right. So this is our 2022 end of year wrap up. And we did one of these last. Okay. My voice is coming in and out. Okay. Yeah, and Sean, you brought up a great point. Like one of the things I love to do in these wrap-ups is, well, especially the pandemic and I don't know, are we post-pandemic years? Like it's so hard to remember like what happened at the beginning of the year by the end of it. So I think I'm going to let you kick it off, Sean.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I kind of feel like we are both post-pandemic as well as pre-pandemic. It just feels like we keep going on this roller coaster, but I digress. So yeah, in a year that started where we were still dealing with Log4j, which dropped December 20th, which is almost a year ago. The year before that, at the end of the year, we had to deal with SolarWinds vulnerability and issues around a number of attacks that were both on-prem and cloud. So we rolled into 2021 with that. We rolled into 2022 trying to figure out what was vulnerable from Log4j configurations, which appeared to be just about everything. Affected systems like VMware and others that were configured with a number of Log4j elements, which made these other systems vulnerable that we didn't think were or were not touched by that. In this year, in 2022, we saw things like more Active Directory certificate services vulnerabilities on the Microsoft side, the curb relayup attack in the Microsoft world as a local privilege attack that leverages Active Directory in order to get remote or admin access on systems, to more VMware vulnerabilities. And then, of course, the recent IPMI system firmware vulnerabilities released by Eclipsium that we talked about recently as well. So a number of things, very interesting year. I think everyone's kind of on pins and needles wondering what is going to be the big drop in the next few weeks. Hopefully it's going to be quiet so people can get some time with families. But I don't know, Adrian, what do you think? It's been a pretty interesting year.
Yeah, I mean, so we talk about markets a lot here. So I'll do my thing that you might have forgotten, and then maybe Katie will. I don't know if you have anything that we might have forgotten. Yeah, it's just kind of a theme that we came up with on the fly and we're rolling with here. But if you don't, I'll buy you some time. But for me, it was the market. So like we had Gus create these unicorn graphics, and then we were talking about, well, what's bigger than a unicorn? Okay, maybe if they hit a $10 billion valuation, we'll call them decacorns. You know, and there's different terms that are used in the industry and stuff like that. And I think Gus even had a graphic for a decacorn. And so first half of the year, I actually have a spreadsheet where I was tracking unicorns and created a new tab for every month. And I'd go in there, do some analysis. How many unicorns are we at in cybersecurity? and that ended abruptly halfway through the year. The market just dropped out, and suddenly we weren't talking about unicorns anymore. We were talking about layoffs, and I had to create a new spreadsheet tracking layoffs. And we've hit we're north of 5,000 employees laid off from cybersecurity companies at this point. I mean, that's a tiny fraction of what the jobs we've seen lost in like larger tech is more like 180,000 from what I've heard. And but still, that's completely new for cybersecurity. I don't think we've ever seen mass amounts of layoffs. I think the closest we got was the 2008 recession. We saw a bunch of NAC companies go under, so network access control companies. That's the only time I can think of that we saw a lot of companies have any kind of failures or layoffs or anything like that. Katie? There's the decacorn. Are you on mute, Katie?
I was. I'm sorry. And there's the decacorn. There he is. How cute. Related to that, we saw a lot of acquisitions this year. We saw a lot of somewhat surprising things in the market, some not so surprising. We saw Google acquire Mandiant. We saw Thoma Bravo buy Ping Identity. We saw the merger of Human Security, first the name change to Human Security, and then Perimeter X merging. We saw one password company going passwordless. So there were a lot of really big acquisitions that happened all the while the security market was starting to, I don't want to say downgrade, because it really, it's still up from where it was, but the kind of activity, the amount of activity and the huge deal amounts are not where they were at the beginning of the year. But we still saw a lot of movement in the market. We saw some really good deals go through. I think consolidation is always going to happen. This isn't new. But some really big players this year either merging or getting acquired, or companies deciding that they wanted to get into the security game that you wouldn't necessarily think of as security companies from the onset. A company like Google, yeah, sure, it makes a lot of sense for them. But some other companies who are really jumping into the fray a little bit more, that's probably going to be a trend into 2023, because to a degree, security is future-proof. Like, as long as we have a digital ecosystem, we're going to need security.
Yeah. As long as people keep coming up with, especially like AI-based stuff, quantum-based stuff. Yeah. Tech drives security, right? Like the rush to deploy and use new tech. How many products have we already seen wrapped around ChatGPT within like weeks of it coming out? And not a lot of thinking about security in those MVPs that we see pop up.
And we still have all the legacy stuff that's just been sitting out there forever. It's like the issues, the ghosts of Christmas past just continue with us to tie this into a seasonal thing. All the legacy things are still there. We're still managing things the way we have been. I'm wearing my green today. But yeah, it's the stuff that's been there for 5, 10, well, probably more like 10 and 20 years. And nothing's been done about it. And we can't just keep throwing security products at these to solve it. We're seeing...
Sure we can.
Okay, we can.
Well, security pros can do that. Yes, they can.
Yeah, we can and will.
More blinky boxes. That's what we need.
And this podcast will continue to cover it as we see appropriate. Like...
I think, I've been looking at year-end stuff and trying to look at numbers, look at all the data.
Yeah.
And honestly, all of the surveys that I've seen, and maybe this is just selective seeing, but all the surveys I have seen, most security practitioners don't expect their budgets to decrease. They at minimum expect them to stay the same. They're being asked to justify their expenditures, but just a little creativity goes a long way here. And, being on the marketing side of things, I can think of 400 different ways you can position something to make it also apply to operations, to also apply to IT, to also apply, financially. So it doesn't take a huge creative brain to do that. So the justification, I think, is happening more. But as far as the money to actually buy things, if you have the right justification, it's still going to be there. And the media, even the mainstream media, continues to tout this, quote, cyber threat. So that doesn't hurt security at all. I don't think we're going to see a crash. One of my favorite stories from this past year was actually talking about the, quote, crash in the vendor market.
Right.
I had many people send that to me, and it was a great article. And I could be totally eating my words in a year, but I don't think we're going to see it. I don't think that's.
Are you making a prediction?
Yeah.
Are we doing predictions now?
Sounds like a prediction.
No, I'm going on somebody else's prediction. I'm predicting
okay. I see.
prediction isn't happening because, in terms of the market, and we're talking about these down rounds and unicorns becoming zombie unicorns or whatever they're called now.
Yeah.
They're no more decacorns.
Yeah, because we don't know what the valuation actually is, right?
Right. I just don't see the market crashing. So I don't think the spend is going to dry up tremendously. We're just at a leveling out point. And I think that was one of the things that we saw this year. Looking back, it was really interesting to follow the market because everybody was saying, oh my God, all hell is breaking loose. The market's crashing. We're dying here. And I haven't seen it. I mean, there's been correction, but I haven't seen it in terms of, catastrophe and hellfire.
Right. And I also don't believe it's going to happen, but I'd love to get your thoughts on something though. Like certainly some portion of these security products are, they're getting bought and pulled into companies and aren't necessarily useful. Maybe they don't even work. Maybe they don't bring in much value. Maybe they never leave the box. Shelfware continues to be a thing in security. But the fact that you're spending the budget on security stuff still sends a signal, right? So my concern here is that some people are getting value out of just having things to spend that security budget on, even if it's just for show, even if it's just, theater, right? So how long can we continue getting away with that? Saying that, we're going to address that threat by buying this thing over here. And then of course it doesn't fix it, as an industry, are we going to start getting, whoever's buying these products, are they going to get called out on it? Or does this just keep going forever? Sean?
I don't see that changing. It hasn't changed for years. What we've been doing hasn't solved problems. Things have only gotten worse in a lot of ways. Ransomware just took over in 2020 and in 2021 and has shifted and evolved from your standard workstations and popping up a message saying, this is encrypted, you have to pay this amount of money, to affecting hospitals and people's lives. And jumping onto other systems like VMware. It's going to go to cloud. It's going to start using these chat AI systems, and that's going to get worse. These solutions that are out there have not solved the problem yet. I don't see them being able to solve the problem in the near future. But I think we really need as an industry to really focus on combining our tools with our people, to give them the information they need to make good decisions, to improve the things that we have, and really enable. I think that the company that comes out with a really good product around helping solve the legacy issues are the ones that are going to be the most successful and make the most money, because that is such an untapped market.
Yeah. Thoughts, Katie?
I think my size says it all. Yeah, I mean, the problem is, I think we have a lot of companies who would say, hey, we find your legacy solutions. Hey, we help you migrate your legacy solutions. But in reality, and Adrian, I remember you and I talked about this at Black Hat, I think in like 2016. Mm-hmm. I think it was back then. Maybe it was pre-2016. Right. And all these companies on the SIM side, the log management side, who were like, oh yeah, just buy our new SIM tool, just migrate away from, your big entrenched traditional player. We'll migrate you in a month. And we were joking. We were on the show floor at Black Hat, and you were saying, I went through a project and we were 3 years in and we still hadn't even begun our migration.
Yeah.
And so we have those problems, and I don't necessarily see them getting solved by any great new technology soon. I think Sean's right. Like, people and process are super, super important, but if people wanted to migrate their legacy technology, they might have started like 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a number of environments that have Active Directory that still stick around because of applications that can't be moved or are very difficult to move or cost money to move. I think we're going to see the same thing happening where people are going to the cloud, they're adding cloud to their portfolio, so to speak, their infrastructure portfolio, and they still are going to have these on-prem systems because you can't just lift and shift these things easily. When you shift from your on-prem AD, Active Directory environment, I'm obviously talking about what I know, talking about your on-prem Active Directory environment, trying to shift and move that over into Azure AD or some other cloud environment is not an easy translation. Because these cloud systems don't speak the same languages, protocols around authentication, such as Kerberos and NTLM and things like that. We're talking federation when we move into cloud, and that's quite different. So a lot of companies have been looking to just lift and shift or move from Active Directory to cloud. So they've added cloud, and now they have two systems they have to manage. And I think that's one of the problems we've had for a lot of years is that we have had systems, we add new systems, now we have another system we need to manage.
Yep.
And we do that with our same people. And the security of that just exponentially increases. I did a talk recently called Defending the Identity Nexus, and it was all about these connectivities between identity on-prem and in the cloud, as well as infrastructure on-prem and in the cloud. We used to just have on-prem Active Directory and VMware. Now we also have cloud identity. We have cloud infrastructure like AWS, like GCP, like Azure. And cross-cloud just makes that even more complicated because they speak different languages. All the nomenclature is different. So yeah, it's gotten way more complicated, a lot faster than I think anyone thought it would. And certainly COVID sped things up with the remote work environment. And now everyone's trying to figure out, okay, what do we actually have now? And I think inventory is and identifying what is there, what is the connectivity of that should be a priority for everyone as they look into 2023.
So I think I can connect a lot of the things that you said there in that, just the amount of stuff you had. The overhead is tremendous, right? Like we didn't get rid of the data centers. We just added stuff, right? Now we have things to look at in all these different environments. They need their own specific, maybe all that stuff will get combined. Like we were just talking to Qualys about their total cloud. Where I guess the idea is eventually, you'll have, something that handles your on-prem multi-cloud, pulls all that into one place, but that's going to take time. And in the meantime, we still do have these, kind of niche point products. And that's one of the things on Paul's Security Weekly yesterday, we had a bunch of different segments. I don't even remember which one we were talking about where this comment came up. But somebody was saying, I think it was Jason Albuquerque, consolidation is really what CISOs are looking for. They're looking for more platforms, more consolidation, less number of tools to have to manage and to have to look after, because it's it would be really interesting to do another shelfware report. We did one back at 451. Javad Malik did it. And it was really interesting hearing both sides of it, because when he asked vendors why shelfware is an issue, and then when he asked customers why shelfware was an issue, he got some very different responses from each group.
So Adrian, am I hearing you say that there's so many tools, we need a single pane of glass for all of that?
Hey.
You won't hear me say that. Gus, can we meet Sean?
Interestingly, I just had a conversation with a customer, an enterprise security user versus a vendor person. And this person was saying, in fact, that they did not want a platform approach. They were really, really sick of the whole security bundling. They were sick of the whole idea that vendors wanted to be the soup to nuts, the front to end orchestration player for everything. And this person had a lot of good reasons why. Vendors who are expanding into areas that aren't their core competency, creating watered down versions, but locking you in because it's easier. It's easier from a management plane. It's easier from a cost and procurement perspective. It's easier from a maintenance perspective. All the things, that make it easy to use one tool instead of many tools. But this particular person was saying, that's not what I want, because that's not solving all of our problems. And I was surprised to hear, because it was a forum of enterprise end users, that a lot of people agreed with this person. Because I have, throughout the year, heard a lot this, we need a platform approach. We need a tool that does more, that's more robust. We've seen explosion in the API integration. If your tool doesn't integrate pretty seamlessly with others, what are you even doing here? That kind of thing. But this person was saying, yeah, they all need to talk to each other, but I do not want one big orchestration tool from a few companies. I still want that best in breed approach. So that was surprising to me,
Yeah.
Especially given the last few years where everybody's like, oh my God, plethora of tools.
Yeah. But given your point about people and processes, something I spent a lot of time doing is anytime there's details of a breach, I love doing postmortems. Yeah, we even did a segment on the, not the old Uber breaches, but the one that happened this year. And because these attackers are sharing all kinds of details, like we're going to talk in the news in a little bit, the reason we know what happened with InfraGard is Brian Krebs just asked him, he said, like, how'd you make this work? How'd you make this attack happen? And they're happy to tell you. And it's interesting going through the details, and almost always, I don't think I've seen a single case where I'm like, yeah, throwing some zero trust in there would have would have solved that, or buying another product. In almost every case, they had stuff, they had products, they were running systems mostly correctly, but just had things misconfigured, or did stuff everybody knows you shouldn't do, like leaving credentials in plain text. Just amazing how we still see credentials in plain text in 2022, but we saw it in several cases this year. We saw it, we just see it over and over. And I think part of it is people don't think, they're thinking, okay, somebody on their desktop keeping a list of their passwords, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the net logon directory. A PowerShell script was the case with Uber, where, a PowerShell script had a credential in it. So servers with scripts and things like that, JDBC files, with clear text logon credentials for databases. So there's like a lot of tightening up of what we've already bought and we already have that we need to do, which is why I get really excited about companies like Recon InfoSec and Rangeforce, where their purpose is like, okay, you have all these people, you bought all this stuff, let's make sure it's actually working. Sean.
Yeah, and with the Uber breach, the details of that, as you said, there was a PowerShell script that had credentials in it. There was a file that had the login credentials to their enterprise password vault, which gave access to pretty much everything else, because most companies that have a password vault load in, again, Active Directory domain admin credentials, Azure AD, AWS, and in the instance of Uber, based on the public information, that breach of, we're actually finding that password file, that file with passwords, enabled the attacker to jump to their password vault to then get access to pretty much everything else as an admin. I talk with red teamers on a regular basis, and one of the things that I hear a lot is, yes, passwords are stored in files, on shares. Yes, they are on workstations, in just the desktop. People will open up and manage systems by opening up that text file and copy and pasting that password into something else. And to your point, Adrian, there's a lot of issues that we've seen in breaches this year. Like Lapsus was very popular, or very active, I should say, from Brazil to Okta to NVIDIA to Samsung to Ubisoft, Microsoft, Rockstar. Like, there were a lot of things that happened, and the majority of those, from what I recall, happened because they compromised a call center, or they compromised something that was a lower level of security, a partner relationship, and then jump in. That's something that we saw earlier on a couple of years ago with the SolarWinds cloud attacks, where you target the lower hanging fruit where probably the security's not as great, and a vendor with access I believe that's what happened with Target as well, going after a HVAC vendor that was then able to jump in from there. And I think these oopses, this oops, like we know this shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be there. This doesn't make sense from a security perspective, but these are here, whether they're passwords in files or access to vendors that shouldn't be there, to not having appropriate methods to ensure that when someone is changing their MFA method, that there's some security check to make sure that that's the actual person instead of someone impersonating them.
Fazio Mechanical, and the theory was that they got in through the vendor management portal, which they ran on-prem, and that got them in. Katie, I think it looked like you had some thoughts here.
Did I have some thoughts? Well, it might have changed from a few minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking as Sean was talking, years ago, talking to Marcus Ranum about all of this, and he subsequently left security to go do blacksmithing, and his comment, although overly simplistic, was if everybody would just get back to basic sysadmin, we'd be in a much better off space. Again, overly simplistic view of the current tech landscape, but to an extent that's true. It's the small things, the beginning things, the foundational things that will always be what we need to do. And it's not just as easy as fixing it with a widget, right? It is the people and it is the process. And, there've been a million process breakdowns. Putting your passwords in clear text somewhere, that's not a technology thing. That's a process thing. And, the basic system administrative stuff could stop a lot of these things. Again, it doesn't mean it's easy to do. It doesn't mean it's fun. There's a huge amount of burnout at that level because it's a lot of rote, kind of boring work, but it's that process stuff that if more attention were paid to it would help a whole lot. And I don't think we're ever going to see that change because it's not the fun stuff. It's not the sexy stuff.
Well, but we're spending money on it. Like, think about all the money we're spending on detection and response. Like, we've got all these huge SOCs and stuff like that. How many of these cases that you mentioned, Sean, were we actually detecting it? Like, the number one way we're detecting attacks today is when the attacker tells us they compromised us.
Right. And they're jumping in and saying they compromised it within weeks. And I can think the mean time to detection is reduced to 6 months now, maybe 5.5.
Oh, no. The mean time to detection is like, just a couple weeks now because they're telling us.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like it was, it's usually been 6 months.
That's not detection, though.
Right. But, then Krebs says, "Hey, this has been compromised," or there's a Telegram chat that comes out from Lapsus or someone else that says, "Yeah, here's the proof that I did breach this organization." Yeah, it's a shame, and so what Katie's talking about with the fundamentals. I mean, how long have we been saying or have heard that we need a patch? Right, patching has been something that has had to be done since the early days of software. And we're still in a situation where patches are not getting applied.
It's too disruptive.
It is disruptive. It is a pain.
And it's not easy. Nobody is saying that this is easy, but it still doesn't give anybody the free pass to be like, oh, okay, we've got this major That's exactly what Log4j was, right? This is how you open the segment, Sean. Log4j, that was a patching issue.
Yeah. I mean, would you...
OpenSSL too.
What kind of disruption do you want? Do you want the disruption, when you're prepared for it, when you're applying the patch, or the disruption when you choose not to, and somebody, takes advantage of that? Right?
Like, at least
both are disruptive.
If you're applying the patch, you know what's going to happen.
Right, and I've talked to a lot of security leaders who are like, you know what, we're not doing patch testing groups anymore. Like we're just gonna make sure we have a good rollback plan. And, the moment, these patches are available, and this isn't, in only a few cases am I seeing this in production environments. This is mostly with workstations and stuff like that, where they're saying, you know what, any individual, even if it's the CEO, we're just going to take that risk. We're going to force a reboot and just make sure we've got everything up to date on those systems.
I get it. I mean, we're pretty much at that point. And as we talked about in the news segment last week, Eclipsium releasing the information about the issues with IPMI and those hardware-based components, effectively the computer and the computer, having a tremendous vulnerability. And now the server hardware is vulnerable. I mentioned last week that admins don't update server firmware like ever. Because it is disruptive, and unless you're having a problem, you usually don't do those updates. Those firmware updates for servers are now critically important because of the security aspects of them with the IPMI systems, those integrated systems that enable management, out-of-band management, such as HP ILO and Dell iDRAC.
Yeah, remember when nobody was going after IoT systems, and then we had Mirai? And that was not the outcome we were expecting, right? Like, I went back and looked at some really old predictions, and all the IoT security predictions were that all the stuff in our home was going to be getting hacked. But the problem with a prediction like that is you're not thinking about it from the attacker perspective. Like, how are they going to monetize that at scale? Like, you're not. Like, you hack a $100 Google Home, I just get a new Google Home and throw the old one out, right? Like, and I don't see any, like, you're not going to ransom it, right? Like, maybe a Tesla, maybe you can ransom, an expensive piece of property like that. That's the reason they're going after enterprises, is because there's 6 and 7 figures, that, and they even do this. Like, the initial access brokers will get access to hundreds and hundreds of companies. Then they'll look up their revenue, and they're just going to sort by how much money they think that company can pay. Or they hit the cyber insurance companies and they see who has the largest policy. And now they know what to ask for. So, like a lot of these predictions, and what ends up happening with IoT is, they're not going to monetize taking control of the IoT devices. They use them for DDoS attacks, that they could rent out. So you got to think about the money side of this.
Absolutely.
We're telling security people they need to be business minded all the time and understand the business and how to talk to the business. That helps you on the cybercrime side as well.
Absolutely. And as much maligned as NAT was and has been from a security perspective, NAT has done some protection from these IoT devices. I mean, every home now effectively it has a NAT device that your systems behind that are in. So those IoT devices are not necessarily probably not exposed to the entire internet. I mean, they might show up on Showdown occasionally, depending on how you configure it. But you're absolutely right, Adrian. When you're talking about these IoT systems, what's more interesting than an attacker going after a single device or a couple devices in people's homes, or even getting control of the overall network of IoT devices? And now you have millions of them around the world in different locations that you can leverage as part of that attack platform. It's staggering the scale difference with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and looking at what they used to do, trying to sell individual credit card numbers and, people's PII and stuff like that, you'd have to set up a market, you try and sell as many as you can before the banks find out and cancel all those cards. You're maybe monetizing just a tiny, tiny fraction of what you've stolen in some of these cases, like Home Depot and Target and some of those. And it's and so many steps they like to monetize that. Now I'm going to buy an iPhone, and then with that stolen card, and then sell it, and then I get to cash out. It was like a 17-step process for them to get paid. Whereas with ransomware now, again, look at the business model. The business case here. Now it's 3 or 4 steps. It doesn't take months. Now it takes weeks for them to get paid. And instead of getting these little piddly payments, like a bunch of $1 to $20, depending on whether it's full mag stripe or just card and expiration or whatever, whatever these things were going for at that point. Now it's big paydays, 6-7 digit paydays when they do get that payday.
Yeah, I find it interesting since most of those are using Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a ledger, as we've heard about, and all of that's public. Like Bitcoin has been talked about being anonymous. Well, it's not. It's not anonymous because there's a ledger of every transaction. But if you can tie an actual wallet ID to a person, then there's nothing hidden about that, at any level. But Bitcoin is definitely, and cryptocurrency has definitely changed the game from having to have, duffel bags of cash being shuttled through a broker to be dropped off to unlock
By a
something.
mule, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we have a situation where we can use Bitcoin and just transfer that money. Probably brokers are involved as well for ransomware payments. A lot of that has become less legal to illegal in the U.S. So there's a number of things that have to be done to get around that. But to your point earlier, Adrian, you said that the ransomware actors are going to look up to see who has policies and how big those policies might be.
Yeah.
We saw in the SolarWinds issue, you could go to the SolarWinds site and see who their customers were. Right. So if you want to attack and get that sort of supply chain level access to a system, you can often just go and look at the vendor's website to see who their customers are and then be like, okay, well, let's go after them. Let's see what access we can get. And maybe an access broker jumps into that and thinks that there's value in that to compromise that environment to then sell it to someone else. I mean, certainly access to a network that's a Fortune 50, Fortune 100 has got some good dollars associated with it, which is why it's dangerous. And last year I saw an article in the summer that where there was ransomware actors that were basically saying, hey, if you install this on your computer in your corporate environment for us, we will pay you Bitcoin.
Oh, man.
That's insane.
Oh, boy.
Adrian's going, oh, I missed the boat on that one.
Oh, no, that's not what that was at all. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people get in desperate situations. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe they're not making it paycheck to paycheck. Maybe it's paycheck plus a little bit on a credit card, then another paycheck and a little bit on a credit card, and criminals know this. It's why some of them are criminals, right? They understand how to take advantage of desperate people. And I hadn't heard that one before, but that's not surprising at all, Sean. It's really depressing, but it's not surprising.
And then can you even trust them to give you Bitcoin after you give them access? Right. I certainly wouldn't think so. I mean, here are folks that are basically actively compromising, and then they're going to cut you off a chunk of what they're doing.
I've heard a lot of criminals are highly reliable, because they want to do repeat business, right? Like, oh, you got a new job somewhere else? Well, let's do it all over again. Install this implant for me.
You were let go from the other company for clicking a link, and now you're somewhere else. I'm sorry, I clicked the link. I didn't know what was going on.
Is that why people are clicking links? They get paid Bitcoin?
They're getting paid to click links. Just act stupid.
Oh, boy.
It's interesting. Speaking of the past year, this wasn't necessarily a trend or a big story or whatever, but at one of the events that I went to, an author, Maria Konnikova, she wrote the book The Confidence Game, and I read that afterwards because she gave a great talk. And I was so impressed by it. And it talks about how con artists come to be and some of the tactics and techniques that they use. And, we've been talking about this in security too, with phishing and social engineering and things of that nature. But this dove in at a completely different level. And so she talks about why people get into crime and how they actually convince others to go along with their con games.
That sounds really fascinating. Is this online where you can watch it?
It was a book. It's a book.
Okay, I thought you said it was
so The Confidence Game by Maria Konnikova. There's a sheep on the cover. I got mine digitally, but I'll throw it in the chat here. She gave this incredible talk. It was one of the best talks that I've seen at a conference. It wasn't immediately related to security, but of course, this is how criminals work. And her point of view was also, this is how we as defenders can also use this con game to understand what's going on in our environments, what we have to do, how we have to think more aggressively or more offensively versus defensively, because you do have to look at it from the attacker point of view. And some of my co-hosts have a little more devious minds than I do. So, and I've talked to a lot of pen testers over the years who have this ability to switch that on and think in that way. But the psychology behind it is really, really interesting. And it says a lot about what can be done if you are just to use psychology to your advantage.
Yeah, those are fascinating stories, and I almost wonder, like, because you hear some of these folks, like, they go to jail for the con, and then they get out and they go right back into another con, and it almost seems like that's the game. Like, it's not about the money; it's about like the satisfaction of pulling off a con, almost. Like they're just addicted to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. I heard Kornikova when you said Konikova as the author name, and my mind went right back to the early days of viruses.
Yeah,
right. With Anna Kournikova and the virus that went around that, and ultimately thinking back, things haven't changed that much. There is a hook that you get people in with an email. They do something with that, and then you gain access or you gain whatever that thing is. It's just changed from malicious damage to actually a business now, which is interesting. It makes sense, though. A lot of things start as malicious, and then you realize, okay, I can make money with this. There's teenagers that will steal cars to joyride, and then at some point, some of them may realize, all right, well, we could actually sell these cars. And it seems like a very similar thing that's happening or has happened with this as we see ransomware. And then it gets more formalized. When money is involved, big amounts of money, it becomes a real business. And a number of these ransomware groups, they break down, restructure, spin up somewhere else. People kind of move around from place to place, almost like they have a CV or a resume that they pass on to the next group. It's fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. Let's shift a little bit. I wanted to mention some of my favorite episodes this year. I don't have numbers for all of them, but maybe it's recency bias, but the one we just had on Estonia, I think was just absolutely fascinating. How Estonia digitized their government, their culture, like services for citizens, all that stuff. The idea of what did they call it? Digital citizenship?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and all the things about having an AI bot that can perform tasks for you as a citizen and not have to wait in line, that things happen automatically. And all the systems in Estonia are made for this. So you go in, you say you want to change your address or whatever, and the bot handles that for you, connects to each of the systems, confirms it because you have a digital identity. It's incredible.
Yeah. And then we had Andrew Morris, the founder and CEO of Gray Noise, on earlier this year. Talking about I think we talked about his product a little bit, but we were mostly talking about all the noise in the market. And it was funny because we were talking about, how it seemed unsustainable and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And this would have been, I think this was episode 264. This is in March. So just a couple months before we got a pretty solid answer to, our questions about, is this sustainable? But
yeah, I'm a huge fan of Andrew. I've known him for years, and his company Gray Noise, sifting through the noise in events and what's happening, basically identifying that in the world there's a lot of scanning happening, but not all that's targeted. We used to have the big pew maps, so to speak, on the wall in the SOC showing all these different attacks, but all of those, or the majority of those, probably 99.999% of them, are just random noise that happens just everywhere on the internet. And with Gray Noise, being able to identify what is the background noise or the gray noise of the internet versus what's targeted is pretty valuable. And it's an interesting approach to, again, solving a problem that's been there for years, but no one's been able to figure out what a good solution is around that. Being able to filter out that noise to get to the signal is another important thing. But yeah, Andrew's great to just talk about industry and his perspective about things and where things are going. It's always fun to talk to Andrew.
Before we wrap here, do you have any favorites from this year?
Me, definitely Martin Roche, who created Snort. That was certainly one of my highlights, because I remember putting Snort on a computer that I had and just hanging it off my internet connection and seeing what I could see, and working with it later as well. It's interesting. It's great talking to someone who actually defines a market, basically creates a new product segment because that person thinks it's important, something they're interested in, and then all of a sudden you see that there's packet sniffers that are happening everywhere, like all sorts, from there to Wireshark, Ethereal, etc. It's incredible to see how things have evolved, especially from the IDS IPS market.
Katie?
For me, I really enjoyed all the segments with Will Lin, and I'm a little sad. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get him back in that same forum in 2023, but just his perspectives on the market and how he thinks about things. He wasn't necessarily a traditional investor the way some of them are. So his ideas and the way he approached the market was always fascinating to me.
Yeah, likewise. And for those that don't know, Will Lin, we actually have a news story because he's announcing a book as he exits the VC space and becomes a founder. He's starting a security company. No details on what that company is going to be doing yet, but he's also announced a book, and we'll talk about that in the news segment coming up here. And right there's probably we'll have to find another VC for our VC corner, right? So with that, we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.
managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. When it comes to cybersecurity, the biggest threats are the ones you never see coming. SecureWorks detects and responds to cyber attackers' ever-changing tactics. We come armed with Taegis, a security analytics platform designed to recognize attacks and stop them before they do harm. SecureWorks, defending every corner of cyberspace. Learn more at securityweekly.com/SecureWorks. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. You can now find us on Instagram. Follow us for highlight reels, giveaway announcements, and more at Sec Weekly. That's SEC Weekly. All right, now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. This is episode 300, very special round number there. I don't remember what my first one was, but I don't think I've hit another round number, so it must have been after 200. But you can follow along at securityweekly.com/ESW300 if you want to check out the links, see all the news stories that we're going to talk about, and perhaps some that we might not get to. We've got 23 today, not a huge amount, not a small amount. So first on the list, Katie, we've got our first unicorn with a down round. So this
first unicorn, and it will not be the last, unfortunately.
I agree. I doubt that's going to be the last. So I looked up their previous round. This is a Series G. We don't see a lot of Series Gs. Just shy of 200 million, and it's about half what their previous round was, and knocks them down from $8.6 billion valuation. They're number 2 under Tanium on the unicorn list, down to a measly $7.4 billion.
It's interesting why I'd be interested to be in that boardroom, right? A G round with a company with a $7.4 billion valuation. This is not a company that's just popped up overnight. They have customers. I see billboards everywhere I travel, right?
Yeah.
Why take on this debt?
Yeah.
For, either they know something that I've never heard about, which is certainly possible, or somebody's making a crazy bet on this company. But it seems like a huge extent to go to a Series G, especially when, at least from the outside, it appears that there is a good customer base, there is good usage of the product, there's good market penetration, they have good branding.
Yeah.
All the elements seem to be in place.
Yeah, except for the fact that I thought it was like the comic book sound that Wolverine makes when his knives come out, when his blades come out.
Sneak!
Yeah, I mean, that's how I always heard it in my head. And like a couple years ago, somebody told me, no, it's Sneak. I was like, oh, man. I thought it was like Sneak. I thought it was like Wolverine's claws. But yeah, we don't know how they're deploying that capital, right? Like we don't know if ownership is changing hands. We don't know if they're redoing the cap table. We don't know how that 200 million is being deployed. Is it all going into marketing? Are they expanding into EMEA? We don't get those kinds of details. Sometimes it'll be in the press release. They'll talk about how they're going to use the money. Sometimes you have to read between the lines. I remember the $250 million round that Tenable raised, where it was clear they were buying out some of the founders. And basically that's where Gula Adventures came from, right? And Ron Gula started investing back into the industry.
It's just interesting when you look at it, and if you amortize the amount of funding raised, over the years, over the size of the company, over the valuation, how much better off are you?
Yeah.
That's maybe something Tyler can answer, but he's at a party.
Yeah. Both Tyler and Sean. Sean has also left us, dear listeners. They both have holiday parties that are more important than this show to them, and that's fine. That's fine. We can. Katie and I can handle the news. So the next one, it's kind of funny because this started as a joke, and I completely forgot about the joke. And when I was putting together the news, I had these items in there as normal funding. And I don't know how recently you've loaded the links here, but I had to rename it from funding to squirrel funding. Are you now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody said, wouldn't it be funny if somebody wrote a press release that a ninja came out of stealth?
And then here it is.
And here it is. Just
yeah.
I didn't ask if he's okay with me publicly talking about the fact that he's the one that did it, but he knows who he is, and it was very funny. Like, I thought he was just going to write a press release and post it somewhere, but he got a domain name, he set up a fake company, everything. So Ninja 5 Technologies comes out of stealth with $20 million in funding. If it's not clear, this is a joke. And it's some kind of stealth phone. It's some kind of
it's very
secure
fun to read. It's not very long. It is a fun read.
So funny bit, this website and all these posts. There's multiple posts. There's the press release, and then there's almost like a pre-press release, like a coming out of stealth announcement. All written by ChatGPT. All of it's written by ChatGPT.
Yeah, taking our job.
Taking our jobs. Yep.
I need a new job because clearly chat I'm going to be out of a job. Some of these things are just too good. I couldn't come up with that stuff.
Well, I was asking him, how'd you find time to do all this? And he was like, I didn't do most of it. I didn't write any of that. I just asked ChatGPT to. I was like, whoa. Yeah. So practical jokers, you can, your practical jokes can be much more extensive now thanks to ChatGPT. All right, getting back to real news.
Actual.
Not fake news. Resonate raises $8.7 million, cloud identity protection platform. So we're seeing a lot of identity-focused cloud security products. It's a very, very clear and interesting trend here.
Boston and Tel Aviv-based startup that is also pretty par for the course these days. Looking at another reasonable seed round, not an outrageous seed round. So again, looking at that leveling off a little bit, and cloud identity, obviously, big thing with DevOps and the rate at which companies are adopting cloud. So not a surprise at all. I guess it'll be interesting to watch and just see how big the market is, how many of these companies can be sustained, to our point in the previous section, because there's a lot of noise in this space.
One of the things I love about this press release is that it includes a screenshot of the product's dashboard. And you can say a lot of stuff in a press release, but that the whole picture worth 1,000 words thing is super true with a SaaS-based security company, because there's it really clicks once you look at that dashboard. And these guys are pretty early stage, so I don't know if that's a mock-up or if that's what the actual product looks like right now. But either way, it's you can see where it fits into your product portfolio, your product landscape.
Yeah, and I don't know either, but nice looking dashboard, clean, easy to read, very well laid out. So somebody's thought about product design.
Yeah, and I don't know if we need. If a product like this is what we need to solve the, for the visibility we need on identities, but certainly we've seen attacks that take advantage of mismanaged cloud identities. Whether it's whether it's,
and we will continue to.
Yeah. Whether it's AWS keys or IAM roles, certainly a cloud is the thing that can be ransomed. It can be used to mine cryptocurrency. Monero miners are very happy with AWS GPU instances. A lot of stuff you can do with somebody's cloud. You can copy all the data out very, very quickly, from maybe the attacker has an adjacent AWS account and, S3 bucket copy from one AWS to another goes pretty quick, I hear. All right, moving on. Let's see. Didn't have time to look into a lot of these. These other two. I guess there's just two more fundings on the list here. Acquisitions. Proofpoint acquired Elusive, which the detection through deception market wasn't huge. It was maybe half a dozen, maybe 8, vendors at one point. A couple of them got acquired. What was the big one that got acquired by? My brain's starting to go. Getting towards the end of the year.
Observe it.
It was Will Lynn invested in them. They were a ForgePoint portfolio company. But what would you say?
Oh no, I was completely wrong year. Wrong portfolio.
And they did a bunch of stuff. They had a phishing button, so like a phishing reporting tool. They had the deception tool.
No.
They they were a deception company. They just had kind of some of these other products going along with it, and they were acquired by SentinelOne. And we talked about them. We're both Googling.
I'm both Googling crazily.
Ativo.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so that was the other big one. I think that one was around, it was $617 million. But because Proofpoint was taken private, we don't know what the deal size is here. So there's, it's difficult to tell if this was a good exit, if this was exit under duress, as they say. Do you have some inside info there?
No, but I was just going to say, Observe It, that I mentioned before, they were also acquired by Proofpoint, but in 2019.
Yep.
So this is almost a trend for them at this point.
Yeah, so Proofpoint has made a lot of, I guess that's 9-digit acquisitions, 100 into hundreds of millions. I think this is their if this one is over 100 million, this would be their 5th acquisition of that size. So yeah, Proofpoint has been doing some consolidation, which is what we hear CISOs want to see. Them and not nearly caught up with Fortra and formerly Help Systems and their number of acquisitions. But getting there. Also, Veracode picked up a company. I got the impression Crash Test Security was a smaller company, maybe even regional. Were they out of Europe? Did I see that right? Yeah, Germany-based software security tool, Crash Test Security, will enhance the existing DAST capabilities as part of Veracode's continuous software security platform. So, small tuck-in here. I don't think there's a deal amount that I saw, which... is Veracode? Did somebody take them private? I can't even remember. I think Veracode they got bounced around quite a bit between two.
Yeah, they were bought, and then Thoma Bravo picked them up. I'm not sure who owns them now.
Yeah, TA Associates is their current owner. So another private equity firm. Yeah, they got bought by CA, and then CA got bought by Broadcom, and then Broadcom spun them out to Thoma Bravo, and now they are, this year, at some point this year, we must have reported on it, I'm sure, got acquired by TA Associates. Yeah, it was in March, which is why I don't remember it now.
Brain doesn't go back that far.
Not these
days. It's like when somebody asked me about a piece I wrote from 3 months ago, I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm in it, and then it goes out my brain. That's why we have storage on our laptops.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody contacted me. I did another podcast and a while back, and like I just saw it on my socials. Like they tagged me, that I did a podcast with them, and I was like, I did. Like it was. That's one of the things I love about this podcast, because we do everything live. This is published within an hour after we're done with it, and this one. I mean, we get a whole production crew here. This is one of those one-person podcasts, and I guess he just got busy, got backed up. But next time I'm here, I wanted to mention. I don't have a huge opinion on it, except it's a move in the right direction. But Apple is now, what I understand about this is they're going to be encrypting more of your data in iCloud. I think in the past they hadn't been doing that, which gave law enforcement the ability to recover data from iCloud, which was one of the excuses for not putting a backdoor in iOS, as the FBI was requesting of them. If somebody had iCloud syncing turned on, most of the data they were after was already there, right? So now looks like we're going to have some end-to-end encryption between the phones and the data stored in the cloud, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Which is really a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think there's a certain amount of expectation of no privacy when we're using our phones, when we're using our laptops, when we're using anything connected, really. And that shouldn't be the way it is. So kudos to Apple, because I know this has been a very long road. It's been a contentious road. I mean, the amount of money that they must have spent fighting these kinds of things, the requests, and of course there are certain ones that they have to and should comply with, but the oversight and the extraneous data requests or data access, it shouldn't be allowed, and the world is different than it was 10 years ago. It's different than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and it shouldn't be just because we're using a technology or a service that everything we know or do or say goes out the window. So this is great. I hope other companies follow suit. I don't think a lot of them will, at least not right away, because it's really expensive to do it. But good on Apple and they've been pushing this for a long time.
Apple has an expensive ecosystem, but that's actually a benefit to the customer here, because instead of subsidizing their products by selling data to partners, to advertisers and stuff like that, they're making their money off of their customers directly, which means there's not an incentive, to be loose with data here, to have data sharing, stuff hidden in EULAs and stuff like that. So it's actually a benefit of Apple devices being expensive, is like that's part of your assurance that they don't have to make up some extra profit somewhere else by selling your data.
Right. Right. And it looks really, I saw an ad somewhere recently saying $1,500 cash back on your new iPhone. And I was like, what? But then when you put it in perspective, it's the cost of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're paying not to have to deal with all of this other stuff or all of the other money you would spend on other things to either, buy products or not buy products or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you scroll down on the item for this a little bit to the first image there, it's a really interesting use case they show here. So in this use case, in this mock-up, the owner of the phone is chatting with somebody named Jenny. And at the bottom, right where you would type your responses to Jenny there's a little warning that an unrecognized device may have been added to Jenny's account. So that's really, really interesting. Like, I'm not sure exactly what the scenario looks like that results in that warning being sent to someone that you're connected to, but I imagine that might lead to a bit of an awkward conversation, though.
That might lead to me turning off my phone and taking out the battery if I can.
Yeah, no, you can't take out batteries anymore. You need special tools for that.
That's why I said if I can. I don't really know. I'm sure I can crack open my phone at some point, but
no, it's all glue. Yeah, I actually have I do phone repair, and they make a like a heating pad that you would lay that on to melt the glue, and then you have to pry the screen out, and you have to take the motherboard out, and a few other things like the charge port. There's no headphone jack to take out anymore, but
no, there's not. Yeah. And I had to go buy myself a pair of the Bluetooth earbuds when I got this, because I was like, oh, which is actually good, because then I came right into the 21st century.
And then you have access to the battery, and there's these little adhesive pull tabs. So the adhesive that keeps the battery stuck in there, there's this little tab, and if you carefully pull it, like a bit of stringy cheese on a pizza, the whole adhesive piece will slide out from underneath the battery, and then you can take the battery out.
Really? So, you had to go to pizza. Before this segment, you're talking about Indian food. Now
I'm hungry. I've not had a meal today. I've been unintentionally fasting because it's been a very busy day. So
right, but now you're just torturing the rest of us.
So I might be a step closer to being convinced to switch to an Apple device. They're doing some cool stuff there.
Yeah, that's I'm not an Apple. Well, that's not true. I have 3 Mac laptops, but I've been an Android phone user for a really long time. But Apple started, way back when, having much better security. They had other things that I disliked, but much better security. And it sounds like they're pulling ahead again as far as that goes. So hopefully the other manufacturers will also work in the same vein. But if they don't, if it doesn't work out, yeah, you're right. From at least a security and privacy perspective, this is really attractive.
And they've been really consistent with their product strategy on being interested in their safety of their customers. Not that other manufacturers aren't, but that's led to some very specific product features. And right. At the same time, they've also had some issues, like the issues with like it would be nice to have your phone call 911 when you have a car crash, but then it starts doing it while you're on a roller coaster, because that looks very similar to the accelerometer data. And the audio, like they use a bunch of different sensors to determine, like screaming. Like, of course, people are going to be screaming on a roller coaster. So now the theme park's getting all these 911 calls all at once too.
So I just had a really terrible thought, and I'm going to share it because it's Enterprise Security Weekly. I wonder if there have been any deaths from phones falling out of people's pockets on roller coasters.
Oh, like the phone hitting somebody?
Yeah.
I'm not sure phones, like maybe a kid or something like that. I don't think they're going to fall fast enough to kill somebody. They could definitely injure somebody. It
depends if you're on the upswing or the downswing, where you are.
If it's got some extra velocity behind it, yeah.
Yeah, if you're on a roller coaster, you've got that momentum.
It could become a projectile, definitely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring us down a really dark path there.
No, it's fine. It's the other thing I was going to mention with Apple was the snafu with AirTags being used to stalk people. So that kind of goes against that, like the intent of that. I mean, if they asked anybody at Security Weekly, we would have, we definitely saw that coming. It was obviously something that Tile dealt with early on. So, it's kind of interesting they had to add some new functionality after the release of that. But still, best intentions. I wish we had Sean here, because I was going to ask him about number 10, because I don't really understand passkeys, because it sounds like it's another category of. Do you understand anything about the passkeys? Because it's different from security keys. It's different from TOTP, I understand. It's
apparently the first line of defense in our digital lives, and they're a great risk of being phished. This is not.
You can't just read it.
You can't
just read the press release.
No fear and uncertainty here. No, I don't understand the intricacies.
Yeah. But it's well, I mean, it's clear that it's another form of authentication that's intended to be low friction. It works with biometrics. So I think Windows Hello already supports this. And I've already seen a couple cases where I can use Windows Hello to log into a website, which is interesting because that's going to be a fingerprint or a face identification, and same thing on Apple devices. Face ID and Touch ID. So, yeah, I'm all for it.
Securely generated code is exchanged unlike a password. There's nothing that could be leaked. Okay, that needs a little more reading up.
Yeah, I think the idea is the passkeys are single use. So that's why they're saying there's no credential to be captured if they're generating one-time codes. Again, I'm guessing here. We'll have to ask Sean to
this
read
is
up
definitely
on this one.
Something that requires further reading.
Yeah. Let's see. I mentioned was that in the last episode? Yeah, I think it was the last segment. I mentioned Will Lynn's new book, The VC Field Guide, which he has announced. Writing a book with Wiley, and be very interested to check that out. He has some very interesting thoughts on VC. I think some very clear thoughts that I am looking forward to seeing in that book. I don't think I ever made a list of all the security companies that went public via SPAC. I know of at least one that failed, and I think it was Complex, which had a really funky spelling like QOMPLX or something like that. They basically undid the SPAC like a couple days after they went public through it. But this was another one, IronNet. And IronNet got a bunch of coverage because there was a pretty famous ex-military
General Alexander. Yeah.
Thank you. General Alexander was like typically that would be somebody who's on the board, but I think he was actually credited as a founder. Was that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was largely touted as his company, and there was a lot riding on his reputation here. Yeah.
Yeah, and this thing it's below $1. It's at a point now where it looks like it's probably going to be delisted. I didn't see if this is on the NASDAQ or not. Not that it matters. No, it's New York Stock Exchange. But yeah, I imagine it's going to get delisted. It's just it further confirms that SPACs aren't a great way to take a company public. I think it's worked in a few cases.
That's a trend we can hope dies after 2022.
Well, they made it much more difficult to do it, and we've seen people even run out of time to because I think that's one of the factors is you only have so much time to identify targets to take public using your SPAC. And I think it's gotten a little bit more difficult, so we'll see less for that reason alone. But yeah, I'm not sure it made a whole lot of sense. Like a secret company going public, you wanna have absolutely no ability to judge the risk for your investment. Sounds great. Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, I guess they were hoping that there would be enough built up anticipation, but
or you really trust like whoever runs the SPAC, like you just really trust their judgment, I guess, right?
Well, there is a certain community within the cyber community that believes that, hey, if you've got good, trustworthy people working at your company, then you should just buy into that company. I don't know if that's the greatest strategy for putting your cybersecurity in somebody's hands. Like, hey, they did well before, so therefore they're definitely going to do well this time too. But that's sort of how the SPAC, an element of the SPACs worked as well.
Yeah. All right, let's see. So you actually, the latest version of your newsletter, were you doing some predictions there?
Well, I was asked to do a year in retrospect type of post and then tie that into predictions. But I think predictions are a little silly, so I had a little fun with it. You, of course, offered up your own prediction in my post there, and not terribly surprisingly, it focused around our good friend, the job killer, that is OpenAI's GPT-3.
Yeah. Indeed.
But it was really a fun post because, looking back at things that people predicted a little over a year ago, what was happening? Well, we talk about security being really fast moving. I think that's sort of a reel that a lot of us play in our heads too. Because there are a lot of things that we've actually been working on for 4 or 5 years that haven't advanced to the level of quickness that might otherwise be attributed to the cybersecurity industry. And we were talking about it in the last segment too. There are things that we just still need to work on and will always need to work on. So that's part of the reason I think predictions posts and trends posts are kind of silly, because a lot of these quote predictions are just predicated on what's been trending. And so that's not much of a prediction, really. I mean, I guess it's a prediction of sorts, but there's no...
It's more of an observation, right?
Yeah, it's an observation. There's no magical, in the future you will da-da-da, whatever that case may be.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think it's worth every now and then going back and looking at older predictions and seeing what people were thinking. Like if depending on where you go back, I mentioned consumer IoT devices. There's a big prediction that that was going to be the biggest, spiciest place we were going to see hacks. And my opinion was, people maybe didn't think about the financials, the economics of that. For the criminal side, there just wasn't a whole lot of benefit there, or a clear way to monetize that. And then you go back even farther than that, and mobile security was a big thing. We needed to run AV and host IPS and all this crazy stuff on our phone, or all our phones were going to get hacked. Except the thing was, phones were already they were sandboxed before anything else. iOS and Android were born in times when everything was getting malware on it. So they were hyper aware of that. And because of the design, all your software comes from a centrally controlled app store, makes it much easier to keep malicious software off it. Wasn't a guarantee. People still slip malicious stuff in there,
Sure.
Using ad platforms, you could get malicious stuff on there. A lot of social engineering. We've seen a lot of mobile devices, not really the device getting hacked. It's just conning somebody into manually doing something that ends up in their device getting compromised. So, yeah, predictions are, I think it's interesting for other people to do them and to go back and, with the benefit of hindsight, critique them. And think, why did we think that? Yeah.
I was when I was at Forrester, when, the analysts, I was not an analyst there, I was in sales there, and the analysts would go back and look at their predictions from a few years before, and some of them would just get such a good chuckle. And, others of them would be really, oh, geez, I messed that up. And others would just be like, yeah, you could either see this coming a mile away, or, wow, missed the mark on that one. Oh, well, that's what a prediction is.
Yep. And if anyone predicted that TikTok would get banned, actually, I think a lot of people are surprised it's not more widely banned than it already is. But in the news, we have both Taiwan and Texas banning TikTok, and of course, this is just on like public employee devices, and employees of the government. Not everyone who lives in those places. But still notable to talk about.
Well, it's not just that, because the U.S. Senate 4 hours ago, it was reported on NPR that the U.S. Senate approved a bill to ban TikTok on federal agency devices.
Oh, really?
Governor Sununu banned TikTok from state government devices.
Breaking
and Kemp,
news.
Kemp bans TikTok from all state devices. Yep.
Wow.
So, and that's just the top of my news. But yeah, it's really heating up, because this is not, you can't control this, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting because the fear here it isn't all that visible. Like the fear isn't that, oh, there's a backdoor in the app and they're going to siphon data off your phone. The fear is more that they're developing these algorithms where they don't ask your age or gender. They've gotten smart enough where they can just figure that out from your habits. Like the fact that you don't search what you want to watch on TikTok, it just knows what you want to watch. Like it's much more subtle. And I think, as a result, much more creepy what they're doing with it in terms of, okay, now if they understand how everybody's thinking and what everybody wants, to watch or to see, now you can be manipulated, right? Now you can be fed some propaganda. You can be led to think a certain way about different things. They can slip in a video here and there, to do that kind of stuff. And that's... the fact that everybody on TikTok is just part of one really giant, like, behavioral study. that's what's kind of creepy about it, right?
It is. Even Instagram works that way a little bit.
Oh, not a little bit. a lot of it.
I only use it to post pictures of my dog, and I actually had a big fight with Facebook because you're supposed to have your Instagram linked to your Facebook account, and I didn't want it linked to my Facebook account.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on TikTok, but I wanted my dog to be, or on Instagram. I wanted my dog to be on Instagram because she's amazing. And I had to go through such rigmarole to get a profile that wasn't on Facebook onto Instagram. And all I follow are Boykin Spaniels, because my dog is Boykin Spaniel. She's amazing. She's blind. She's 9 years old, and she's just great. And so I watch all these Boykin Spaniels now on Instagram, and I don't get to choose. I can choose the dogs that I follow, but plenty of other stuff pops up in my feed as well, and I don't get to say, hey, I want to see the latest ones, or I want to see the most popular ones, or I want to see the ones tagged with this or that or the other thing. And I don't love it, but the only thing I'm posting is pictures of my dog. Now I know, people could figure out all kinds of stuff if they really wanted, go ahead. You can also have my social security number if you want, you can find it if you have the right search skills. Same for credit card. It's great. Go ahead. Charge things to my credit card. But it is pretty creepy. And TikTok even takes it a level further. And, just knowing what is happening with all of this data, there are enemy nation states, so to speak. And on a personal level, it's creepy. On a nation state level, it's absolutely terrifying.
Well, I think it's something that has to be regulated, because earlier we were talking about, okay, what's your price to install malware on your network for an extortion crew? In this case, like the average person, like if you have really, really good content, really excellent content, and an excellent platform to watch that content on, like people have a really low price to install that app and to use the heck out of it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not something where people are going to choose to do the safer thing, when it seems harmless, and they're not aware of any negative repercussions to them. Yeah, it's something that has to be handled at a regulatory level. Because we still don't really have good intelligence on what's happening with that data, or who has access to it. Like the last big story that came out with TikTok was like, oh yeah, actually, all kinds of people outside the country have access to that data. They can log right in and look at it, even though sure it's all running in the U.S. and there's U.S. employees and all that. Like that data was making it back where it needed to go. And speaking of trends that I don't think will end well, number 17 here, Web3 antivirus for Chrome. I'm not sure we need Web3 antivirus as a Chrome plugin. It's at least very specific to Web3. So it's looking to protect you from scams and con artists and that kind of thing, which is a good thing, right? But yeah. I don't know that this is the best way to implement it, because there's all kinds of, like, you've got dedicated Web3 apps on your phone and stuff like that. Not everything you do is going to be through Chrome. I don't know. This is we'll just have to kind of watch and see.
But this is a marketing play. It's a marketing play just as much as it is a security play.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're benefiting off of the fact that there are more scams than legit Web3 enterprises out there.
Yep.
A must read, absolutely must read, is the Blameless Postmortem of USA versus Joseph Sullivan by Ryan McGeehan. I understand why he decided to make it a blameless postmortem. And I don't think that hurts its usefulness. But certainly the case is all about blame, and laying blame. And there's still a conversation to have there. But Ryan is friends with Joe, so I totally understand why he decided to go this route. But he has done a huge service for the community. He bought, I'm assuming it's thousands of dollars worth of court transcripts on his own dime, and read through, I think, thousands of pages of court transcripts. And, these are depositions. These are the transcripts from during the trial. There's all kinds of technical details in there. And this is an excellent read that I think everybody, certainly everybody on the defender side, should take the time to read through. Like, there's detection engineering details in there that are really interesting. Opinions on the case. It's just really good. Let's see what else here. I think I skipped. No, I didn't skip TikTok. That's right. We talked about that. Really interesting report here, The Future of Ransomware. This is a report by Trend Micro. One of the authors is my good friend Stephen Hilt, which I realized after I started reading through it. Really easy to read, really good kind of overview of where ransomware's been, where it is now, and where it's likely going in the future. So very readable report. I think one of the most approachable and imaginative, which you need in a predictions report, right? Some good stuff. I think definitely worth a read. So there's a post. I've got two links in here. There's a post and a longer report, and I link directly to the PDF there. Let's see. KringleCon. We actually had a whole part of the news segment for Paul Security Weekly yesterday. We had Ed Scotus, or is it Scutus? I always get it wrong. Scotus? Gus, do you know? Is it SCOTUS or SCOTUS? Thank you. Yeah, so so Ed SCOTUS, KringleCon is amazing. I think this is the 20th year they've done it. They built their own video game engine just for KringleCon. Like, massive effort. They spend tens of thousands. Well, he personally spends tens of thousands of dollars a year running the infrastructure because he keeps 3 of them, like back 3 or 4 years, running at once. And it's going to teach you cybersecurity skills. It's designed to be easy enough for kids to jump into to learn some stuff. I registered and played some during the segment yesterday, and it's a lot of fun. They created a whole blockchain with currency within the game. It's not worth anything. You can't use it outside the game, but they're using actual smart contracts and actual blockchain technology in it. So they've really gone out of their way to make this both relevant and fun and useful.
And that is the key to learning. If it is boring and not useful,
pass.
Who wants to learn it?
Pass, right? Yeah. So absolutely, check out KringleCon. I think you can just go to 2022.kringlecon.com. Very cool. A lot of fun. There's a social aspect of it. There's a Discord that you can jump on. They've got a channel for each of the challenges where people are discussing them. They'll help you out. The elves in the game give you hints. It's really well done. Let's see. I think so InfraGard got hacked. There's details in here on how that happened. This article links to the Krebs article, and I think we mentioned in a previous segment in our year-end wrap-up segment that Brian Krebs naturally just went to the attacker and said, "How'd you do it?" And the attacker told him. And so there's some good details in that Brian
It's
Krebs
really quite amazing
as well.
Everybody wants their story
They're very
to be
proud.
heard.
I mean, for a lot of attackers, that's a big chunk of it. Is like, oh my God, look at how they just left this wide open. Look at this. Look, I can just go in here and do whatever I want, And they want people to know that they were able to just walk in and steal some stuff. So, especially it being InfraGard, that's painful. That's not a great example.
Yeah, I mean, and as we were talking about, in the last segment, it's all about the big fish, right? They're going after the InfraGard members, the quote unquote marquee names in the industry.
Yeah, I don't know what the motivation was here. I don't know if this was more a hacker just trying to make a point, or if there's like criminal intent behind here and they're looking to monetize something. I mean, this kind of hack does, like, I tend to assume this is more, hacktivist to make a point. But
that's how I read it.
I haven't read deep enough into it to know for sure.
Yeah, I read the article. I just read the Krebs article, but it looks to me like it's more to make a point, because he also says, yeah, I'm asking for 50,000 ransom. I know I'm not going to get it. You could get some of this information. Tons of these fields.
There is a ransom. Is it a ransom or he's selling the data?
We're selling. I think there was a ransom component to it too. I could be wrong about that. I read it a couple days ago, but it was really this person wanted to make a point and say, look, here are all these people who are supposed to be the top of the top in security, and yet here we have this database that's kind of wide open.
I wonder if he'll take Kringle coins from KringleCon in payment.
Maybe something.
That joke didn't land, but
yeah.
So the squirrel story here, not the funniest squirrel story, just kind of like what are we even doing here? So I saw this on Product Hunt, and it's a metaverse web showcase. And basically what they've done is they just take a generic room, 3D environment, like imagine you're developing something for a VR headset. Like this would be a single line of code. You'd just be like, load the room. And then they're just taking chunks of your website, videos and pages from your website, and throwing them on the wall. So it's kind of like walking around in an art gallery where pieces of your website is what's on the walls. And I can't imagine anybody wanting to consume a website not designed for a 3D environment, designed for trackpad, phone, scrolling, clicking. Like, it's just not going to be a good user experience. Yeah, it's just something where I feel like people are just going to throw everything against a wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, I mean...
And can you imagine, like, going through the news like we are, and a new company comes out of stealth, and they push you to literally put a VR headset on your head to read the press release or to check out the website. Like, it's just not worth my time. Like, the number of, web pages I'm going to go through, the amount of stuff I'm going to read every day, I don't want to have to settle that thing on the head, adjust the straps, turn it on, type in the destination. It's just...
Yeah. Speaking of, since we're at the year end here, predictions, there was a prediction that we're all going to be working in the metaverse. And I'm like,
nope.
I don't want to be working in the metaverse. And I don't think a lot of people want to be working in the metaverse. I don't see this being a corporate trend. I just don't. I could be wrong, and I could be totally out of a job in 10 years because I'm old and cranky, but there is zero chance that I'm going to want to sit there at my desk all day in the metaverse.
I mean, rule one, designing a new product is, how is this going to, what problem is this solving? How is this better than the way things are now? How is this improved, user experience, an individual's life? Like what's the improvement here? I just don't see it.
That my computer can now show me images that are 3D, that I can look like I'm in the room with my coworkers when I'm working in my house by myself. Like, what? I don't see any. That it just sounds awful.
Yeah, I would love to. I've yet to try it. I've yet to do like what is it, Chat VR? Like, there's a couple of apps that are specifically designed to where you can work along with coworkers. If I'm going to trash it, like I've got a Quest 1, the first gen Quest at home. Like I would love maybe somebody from Security Weekly, something like that, that also has one. I'm down to try it. I bet Tyler has a VR headset.
He's typing something, so my guess is he's like, me.
I was thinking Tyler Shields, but Tyler Robinson probably does as well.
Tyler Robinson just wrote in our chat, I love working on mine.
Well, then there you go. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
but I don't think Tyler Robinson's really the mainstream, your typical office worker. Yeah. And that's meant in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to understand, okay, like what work do you enjoy doing in there, and what about it makes it better than, like, I could see a situation where, okay, for this task, I need 5 monitors, to be productive.
Well, he just said he has 5 360, that doesn't...
Virtual
360 50-inch virtual monitors.
Okay.
With no space needed.
Yeah, I'd have to try that out, because, like, what's
370 degree.
I guess you can hook into power, but, like, battery life is going to be an issue. Yeah, like I said,
Tyler Robinson single-handedly taking down the grid in Canada.
He's taking me down a notch. Yeah, so, I have used one. Like, the games are pretty fun to play on it. It's I don't know, there's kind of this, like, after having it on for an hour or something like that, there's this weird feeling you get when you take it off. Like, it's kind of exhausting. You realize where you were, and I don't know, it just seems like it'd be really easy to lose track of things in the outside world. Like, I would be more excited about augmented reality than virtual, where you're not completely isolated from the world around you,
Well, not to get us completely off track, but I've read a lot about augmented reality
story.
and mental health problems, and how it can help people with things like depression, and how this augmented reality can help move them past it. Way more in depth than I could even go into, even if we had the time. But yeah, that makes sense to me. But sitting at my desk working, Sorry, Tyler Robinson, you go into the future. I'm going to stay in my curmudgeonly little world right back here on my laptop with my separate monitor that's real. I can touch it if I need to.
I didn't realize Magic Leap went out of business. Did they? Like, totally? I knew they weren't doing well. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Even the Zuckerberg is kind of backpedaling a bit, having to make a lot of apologies for, the amount of money he spent on it with the amount he has to show for it. And, in their defense, they did say this is like a 5 to 7 year project to get it to where it's really something you can be productive with and useful. But at the same time, they're like, they're requiring Facebook employees to use it like a certain number of hours per day. And it sounds like employees don't really want to do it. So
I don't want anything touching my head for that long either. I don't want anything really touching my head.
My ears hurt right now. Like just wearing these headphones, like I keep trying to adjust them, but I don't even like having headphones on that long.
No.
So it's
I can't even wear a hat for more than an hour. So
yeah. I need to do more testing, perhaps with Tyler Robinson before I swear off the metaverse completely. But I think that's a good place to stop with that.
I think you're going to go into the next room right now, and he's going to give you the complete lowdown on why it's the best thing ever.
Over dinner. Over dinner. We'll do that over. I'm hungry.
You should enjoy that.
All right. Thanks so much, Katie, for helping me close out the year, wrap up 2022. We'll talk again in 2023. I think we, Gus, correct me if I'm wrong. We have a greatest hit coming next week. We're gonna play a previous episode rather than. Oh, that's not happening. Well, you can go play any of those previous episodes that we mentioned. They're all out there. 299 was a great one. I think 300 was a great one. I think it was like 264 where we had Andrew Morris on. Go check those out. We're now posting clips, which I love. Short, excellent, like couple-minute clips of some of our shows. If you don't have time to spend a whole 30, 45 minutes on a segment, you can watch just a clip. So be sure to check those out. And that's it from us. We'll see you all next year.